guys, and welcome back to another episode of the ADHDads. I'm your host, CJ.
And I'm JJ.
And I'm really excited to talk to our special guest today. Genevieve King has over 25 years in teaching experience and is a specialist in sustainability and mindfulness education, which sounds intriguing to me. Her program Origins was developed to provide innovative, eco-conscious education solutions that inspire and equip schools and educators in environmental awareness and sustainability. So this sounds like an awesome conversation. Thank you, Genevieve, for coming on. How are you doing today?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing absolutely wonderful. It's very cold here in Montana, but beautiful.
Yes. One of the states that I drove through across country was Montana, and it was just beautiful. And I just loved all the rolling hills and mountains there and open space. It's glorious. So
it's a pretty special place.
I can understand why you would want to get into environmental studies there in teachings, because what a place to inspire that kind of work, right?
Absolutely. I mean, and that's really where it came from. Just kind of my being immersed in this, just vast beauty and connection. And I actually grew up on the reservation. And so in addition to being, surrounded by natural physical beauty, I was also immersed in, cultural practices that really are, about being in balance, living in balance, being in tune with nature. So it was kind of all of that together that really sort of crafted my sort of, ethos on life itself. So
what did that look like, life on a reservation? What did family look like? How many brothers, sisters? And
I'm the oldest of two younger brothers. Mom and dad, we just lived in a little tiny town on the Flathead Reservation. There's a string of little towns that run all along, super small school. I went to school there, kindergarten through graduated, and then left the reservation boundaries and went to University of Montana in Missoula, which was about 35-40 minutes outside the reservation boundaries. But the living there, I grew up with a mom who was very, very natural and sort of crunchy before that term came around, homemade everything and big giant garden and shopping secondhand and all of those kind of things. So I just kind of grew up with that sort of basis of sustainability and conservation and living close to the land. So
yeah, so this sounds like a long time coming that you've been studying this and wanting to share this.
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't planning on doing it initially. I had a triple medical major when I first started university. I wanted to follow in my father's footsteps. He's a retired medical professional in sports medicine. And so I really wanted to follow in his footsteps of sports medicine. And, when I was in high school, I was the athletic trainer for the football team and I loved it. And so my goal was I had a triple medical major. Like I said, I was doing physical therapy, exercise physiology, athletic training. And I had hoped to go work for like a professional sports team somewhere. And, but when I was attending the university, I had my daughter, I have two daughters, my oldest, she was like 1.5 when I went back to school, and I could not find a place that I felt comfortable bringing her. I toured all kinds of schools, in-home daycares and facilities. And after every single tour, I was just like, I am not leaving my baby here. And I ended up enrolling her in the school that was on the campus, which was a really wonderful school. They have a big giant budget, and all the teachers that work there are getting their degrees in early childhood education. And so they had, the top-notch everything. But it was a huge school, and there was like 70 kids in this one, area where I was bringing her. And she was just totally overwhelmed with how huge it was. And she would scream hysterically every day. When I would drop her off, she would be grabbing onto my clothes, and I would have to peel her fingers off one by one and hand her off while she's got her arms out screaming. And they would take her away while she was screaming, and I would just walk to class crying every day, feeling like the most terrible parent in the world.
It's heartbreaking. We've been there.
It's really, really hard. You feel so guilty, and just kept thinking, like, what can I do different? What can I do different? And so I changed my schedule around, and I stacked all my classes on Tuesday, Thursday. So leaving Monday, Wednesday, Friday open. And I went and got licensed to do childcare through the organization on campus. And so I took 3 other kids on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and my daughter, just so that I could be with her as much as I could. And that was supposed to just be to get me through school as a little side thing. And I ended up just absolutely falling in love with it. And I taught all of these kids to read at like 3 and 4. And it was just, I had so much fun with them. It was just a blast. And I was like, it just completely changed my perspective. I was like, I want to work with kids. And so I left school temporarily and moved to Washington. And I worked in 2 Seattle public school systems that were doing a pilot program where they had preschools that were actually attached to the public school system. And it was like through United Way, I think. So they had before and after school care for older kids, plus they had an actual preschool class on site. And so I was hired at these 2 places and ended up becoming the assistant director. And they had no curriculum or anything. It was just, we sing ABCs and play with clay and, maybe do flashcards or something, but there was no set curriculum. It was just kind of like daycare. And I really wanted to come up with a curriculum because I had done it teaching the kids that I had in Montana to read. And so I asked, can I put something together and like develop a curriculum? They were like, sure, go ahead. So I went around and I interviewed the kindergarten and first grade teachers at the schools. And I said, what is it that you need most when a class of kindergartners come in? Like, what would make your job easiest? What do you want kindergartners to know coming in that will, make a difference? Because, with kindergarten, you have such a vast array of abilities and where they're at, both, socially, academically. You have kids that, come from higher socioeconomic backgrounds that, went to private preschools, and they know all their phonics and their letters, and they can write their name, and they know all their colors and shapes. And then you've got kids who, went to maybe publicly funded schools that were more, like Head Start program, that's more of that really started around food, and nutrition. And so they might know some different basic things. You might have kids that didn't go at all, that don't know anything at all. So you've got kids that, have all of these skill sets that are like probably ready for first grade. And then you've got kids that know nothing at all. And you have to, as a teacher, just kind of try to find a middle ground somehow. And what studies show is that when they studied like high school dropouts, like the vast majority of them were behind from the very beginning. They were always behind. And so when you think about, from the aspect of social development and child development, if you can remember going back to being a really young kid, the earliest memories you have of being in school, if you've got a teacher sitting there and you've got kids on the floor in a circle around her, and the teacher saying, okay, showing something, and who knows what this is. And you got a bunch of kids like me, I know. And if you don't know, that feeling that gets embedded in you when you look around and you see these kids that understand what's going on and you don't understand what's going on, like, I think that really changes a child, changes the way they see themselves. We know that kids that are, kind of labeled like behavior problem kids, that affects how they are. They'll become that if they're being treated like that. If they're the ones that's always in trouble, it doesn't take very long before they just sort of morph into that role. Like, okay, this must be who I am, and I'm going to take this role on. And so the kids that don't know what's going on, or they're behind, or they're confused, I think it really has a negative mental impact. And so my goal was to, find something that was the most, developmentally appropriate way to help kids have a array of skill sets that are going to really help them once they get into kindergarten feel confident, and to build that desire to learn and the excitement to learn, because I think that can get snuffed out really easily. So
Man.
I
Yeah.
developed a curriculum for those preschoolers to help them get into kindergarten. And then after doing that for, let's see, I was about 6 years in Seattle. And then I got pregnant with my second daughter, and we moved back to Montana, and I opened up my own school. And so that was the first big official school that I opened up. And I opened that up in 2002. And I ran that school for about 8 years. I ended up selling it to the woman that was the manager, that I hired to be the manager eventually, because after almost 8 years, being back on the reservation, and that's one thing that there's a lot of social economic disparity that happens there, a lot of things that happen. And so I was starting to feel a lot of burnout, and I got offered a position as the executive director of a nonprofit green business, like consulting firm, called the Sustainable Business Council. And so I took that job opportunity, and I kept running the school from afar. I moved back to Missoula, and had a manager running it. And then eventually I just sold it to her because it was too much for me to try to manage both things. And so I completely switched gears and was working in the world of sustainability. And so now, instead of teaching kids, I'm trying to teach adults about sustainability and green business practices. And after 4 some years of trying to teach adults how to undo their deeply ingrained bad habits, I was just had this epiphany moment, and I was thinking, every truly successful social movement has to have an education component. And what I knew at that point from child development is that those early years, that 3 years old to 6, 7, 8, early grade school, those are the most formative years in a human being's life. That's where the most brain growth happens. We're talking like 1 million neural connections per second during these years, and then it drastically slows down after that. And the most potent piece is that this is when our default modes are set. This is when we learn who we are as an individual against what the world is, and how we learn to see ourselves in relation to the world and to other people. And so I was thinking, oh my God, that's the time where we need to be teaching sustainability, and is when becomes a default mode. Because you look at those years, those formative years, we look at them from the trauma standpoint, right? Like, adults spend their whole adult life trying to undo their childhood traumas. We know that what kids are exposed to in these years are imprinted on them forever. And so that's why so many adults are in therapy, and all of these things. We're trying to work on the stuff that happened to us, that became our modes way back then. And so what an important, powerful time. So if we're able to instill an understanding of our humans' place in the environment, humans' place with the planet, if we can help teach kids that we have to take care of the planet that takes care of us, and that can become a default mode, that means that as adults, they're going to have much more, responsible, sustainable behaviors. They're going to care more. And so I took what I had been learning in the world of sustainability, which were these concepts of like conscious capitalism, slow food, slow money, farm to table, localization, where you keep your money in a local economy rather than, shopping at locally owned businesses instead of big box stores, like all of these things. And decided to kind of synthesize all of this down and come up with a new curriculum based on all the things that I had already learned from, just from the academic standpoint of interviewing all these teachers. And then how can we meld that with, ecology and, a love for the planet. And so I developed a new curriculum and I opened Origins Education in 2011. So it was a brick and mortar school. I opened the second location in 2013. I opened the third location in 2017 and the fourth location in 2019. So we had 4 brick and mortar schools, all in the same area, like different parts of town. And then in 2020, pre-COVID, I decided that I wanted to start franchising. I was going to start franchising Origins. I put the whole packet together, got the financing together, everything, and we were going to start helping open other Origin schools using, that use this curriculum. And I was in a meeting with a mentor of mine, a business mentor of mine, and I was telling him all about the franchising, showing him where I was at, how much I had gotten done. And he said, Genevieve, what's your goal for yourself over the next 3 to 5 years? Not professionally, but personally. And I said, the first thing that popped into my mind was less stress. I want to have less stress in my life. And he just kind of chuckled and he said,
Don't we
you
all?
think, yeah, he sort of chuckled and he said, you think franchising is going to be less stress? And I remember just feeling like I had been punched in the stomach and it just hit me. Oh my God. Yeah, no, this is going to be crazy. And it was like all these thoughts just went through my head in a flash. And I just thought, like, I knew that wasn't what I should do. But then the thought popped in, like, I was probably sitting there in dead silence for like 20, 30 seconds. And then I was like, wait, instead of starting new schools, why don't I just take the curriculum, package the curriculum, and we can share it with schools that are already open everywhere? And that's a way, way better way to share what we have. And so that became the switch, and Origins curriculum was born at that point. Then COVID hit right around that time.
Oh,
And
didn't
so
COVID put a stop to all of our plans and dreams?
but it was also like this, epiphany moment of like, okay, we need to do grade school curriculum also, not just preschool curriculum. So we developed homeschool curriculum because schools were shut down everywhere. And so we have classroom curriculum, but we also have homeschool curriculum. And this is from pre-K all the way through elementary, like full year-round curriculum. And so we did a beta test year in the 2020-2021 school year. And then we officially launched in September of the 21-22 school year. So right now we're just like a few months into our second year. And we've got subscribers in 4 countries. We sell to a wide array of, homeschool families, alternative schools, micro schools, preschools. And it's been just an absolutely incredible journey. And, one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we've gotten from, subscribers, particularly homeschool subscribers, is how well this has worked for kids that are, neurodivergent and, all these different types of families. It's a very child-led, emergent curriculum. It's not linear. It's a very cyclical curriculum. And we sort of just turned traditional education on its head. So instead of having kids having to sit for class after class after class, math class, science class, history class, memorizing, the public school system, the public education system in general has, it's failing. It's been failing us for a really long time for a huge variety of reasons. But particularly this one size fits all approach that leaves out so many different learning types, so many different, and it's this one size fits all approach. And it's also this regurgitate, memorize, comply, sit still, all of these things that are just absolutely counterproductive to healthy child development, particularly with boys who should be moving and running and jumping and playing all day, not being forced to sit at a desk for 8 hours, the same amount of time that parents have to sit at their desks. So it's just been, watching the fallout of what the public education system has done, not only to kids, but to the planet, because really it's a system that was designed to pump out workers for corporations. So it's a capitalist system specifically designed to have people ready to work corporate jobs, or back then it was like manufacturing, and you know and so that it's not what we need today, and it's harmful. So I have all kinds of all kinds of beef with the with the public education system, and
No,
the
I can
harm the
relate to
harm that it's
that.
caused.
No,
Yeah.
I definitely agree on some of that there, and I'm definitely a kid that struggled a lot in class with my ADHD, and that wasn't even understood really in the 90s yet.
Right. Yeah.
That was a very new term, and it was
Yeah.
like Rain Man or nothing,
Right.
and
Exactly.
and with neurodivergency in general, and ADHD now we kind of understand as part of the spectrum of all of that, rather than its
Yeah.
separate thing that may or may not be part of every child. There's a lot of debate about that, but I know that I was gifted in areas that I had interest in,
Yep.
and
Yep.
the ones that I didn't, we were just talking to a guest the other day, Kristen Carter, and she has a company called I Have ADHD, and, she was talking about the kind of consistency with neurodivergence of like, when you're interested in it, that's where the hyper focus is. That's where you get locked in and you grow the most. And if you don't, grades either go A or F, for her in school. And I
Yep.
related to that a lot. And I was a part of this program in San Diego in the 90s. It was called the GATE program. I don't know what the acronym was for it, but it was like a kind of blended class of like, so it would be like third, fourth, and fifth graders. And you would kind of like learn the curriculum based on where you were. So some third graders were, higher in math, and they would be learning with the fifth grade levels when that was taught. And then others were, worse off in this. So they had to, fifth graders were down with the third graders. So, and I found that program really beneficial.
Absolutely.
And that attentiveness to, like you say, not conformity, not just like
Right.
fit into this box. This is the way, and everyone needs to learn it. There's so much potential in like individuality and that experience of education, and I think
Absolutely.
that's where you get really great minds, like,
Yes.
these free thinkers and avant-gardes of philosophy and thought.
Yes.
So I really love blending all of this stuff and teaching them
Yes.
at an early age, because I'm going to be honest, you're really making my wife's point. We our my wife taught at a private school, and she lost her job, so we took the girls that were out from there and we moved about 20 miles away. But our youngest is still in the preschool that was right across the street. It's very high end. It's in Bel Air, very nice community. And now the girls are going to public school, and, like you say, they're excelling ahead of the class because they've had that foundation.
Yeah.
But I've been, irked this year because I'm still driving little one, 4 hours a day in traffic to go pick him
Oh,
up and drop him off. And I'm
yeah.
like, does he really need to be in school right now? Like, he's 3, like, and my
Right.
wife is like very adamant about like, no, we need to this is the most important years that he needs to be in school. It's the earlier, the better. And she had an experience, with daycare with our oldest where, they were basically essentially abusing her, because she wouldn't lay down for nap time. So they would go down there and kind of smack her upside the head and push her down, and,
Oh my
caught it on the
gosh.
security camera when my wife was
Oh my
watching,
God.
and went there and yanked her out. And, so my, opinion about let's get them in a daycare out here closer has been shot down very adamantly with no way. Like I had that experience because I'm a stepdad to 3 children, so I'm trying to catch up on all this stuff. She's had a few
Right.
more years than I do on this journey, you know.
Yeah.
So I can understand, and again, hearing you and talk about, you know, how important those early developmental years are in setting them up for understanding, you know, who they're going to be and express themselves in the educational system is
Right.
really valuable. And I'm sure my wife is never going to let me speak another word about pulling the little one out of that Bel Air private school right now, you know, so just got to suck it up, Buttercup, for the next 6 months. But I'm curious, Genevieve, like, what does this curriculum look like? You know, like, how do you package it and give it to a school to implement in their educational system? Or
Yeah. So it's a digital curriculum, so you access it through our website, through the portal on the back end there. Um, we it's and I kind of got myself off track, but I realized that I had started to say, rather than sitting and class after class after class doing subject after subject, we've flipped it. And what we're doing is we're learning through the lenses of those subject, but that's not the focus. The subject, the class subject, is not the focus. We are doing a deep dive into each of the global biomes around the planet. So we start, and there's 4 kind of guiding questions, 4 focal points that have a guiding question that go with them. So it's internal, external, metaphysical, and interconnection. Those are the 4 focal points. And the guiding questions are: it's internal, who am I? External, who lives here? Metaphysical, what's happening? And interconnection, how is it all connected? And so we're starting with, who am I as a human being? As how does my body work? The systems of the body. We're talking about the family structure, and going beyond. Most little kids, they know, mom and dad and aunts and uncles and cousins and grandparents, and if they're lucky, maybe great grandparents, but it kind of fizzles out after that. We're introducing the concept of ancestors in a much deeper way. So we're really starting here, focusing on this. And then when we get to the next focal point, external, who lives here, we're talking about all the plants and animals, the original peoples of all the different areas. So we're looking at all the different life forms who live on the planet. And metaphysical, what's happening? We're looking at, how do all these systems work? There's all these different systems. There's economic systems, there's food systems, there's weather systems. Like, how do these all work? And then interconnection, we're coming back around to, how is it all connected? So we deep dive into each of the global biomes, where they learn about, like I said, the original peoples, the plants and animals, food systems, soil types, weather patterns, effects of climate change, or how things are changing as things are changing, like how different individual biomes are affected, how these regions are connected to a greater global web. And so we're learning through the lenses of mathematics and science and culture and society and art and all of these different things. But those aren't the focus. The focus is the biome. And then there's lessons that are all within those different, it's multidisciplinary. So there's lessons that have multiple different lenses that we're looking at it through. So it's just a totally unique way of teaching, where the focus is not on the class itself. And this allows for kids to be learning about topics and learning through the way that they learn, whether they're kinesthetic or auditory, or what their learning style is. And it also allows for kids to pick the things that they're most interested in, the way that they choose to look at the world. So they're allowed to have all these different opportunities to look through these different lenses and be able to see, oh, this is what makes sense to me. And they'll follow, and then and then
Which
it's a
I
way
think
to
is so important for neurodiverse kids, because
absolutely.
neurodiverse. We have a 8-year-old that's autistic, and she sees the world with, tunnel vision on and very black and
Yep.
white in the way that and it's very hard to get her to explore that empathy. So like, what a
Right.
great kind of integration to teach that so early on, where a lot of parents of neurodiverse kids struggle with that aspect of, how do I get my child to understand empathy?
Absolutely.
And I think that
Absolutely.
reciprocal sphere that you're talking about, and how everything affects each other, and how they can, again, incorporate that into their view, is so important in neurodivergent development.
Absolutely. And we've gotten such good feedback from parents with neurodivergent kids that it's really, encouraging, and we know that it's working. So that's been fantastic. It makes me feel really good that it's being received in that way. And it's, infused with mindfulness all the way throughout. So there's many, many opportunities for kids to really just get in touch with themselves, which particularly for neurodivergent kids often is a struggle. Sometimes they're just going, 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 and it's kind of like, overstimulation. There's so much happening. And to be able to turn that back inside and have those like self-regulation moments is also so, so helpful.
So I'm curious too, because I saw on your site that like you like use, how would like math be taught through this lens? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we do. It's a very right brain approach to math, very hands on. And so, for example, and of course, it's going to depend on the age of the child or the developmental level of the individual child where they are. But it's a lot of like hands on, practical, like, you were doing a nature walk today and we're collecting, nature artifacts that we're going to make an art project with. And so they're picking up little pine cones and rocks and sticks and twigs and seeing old dried flowers of different colors and things. And then we get back and we're sorting things. We're sorting, we're counting, we're adding things together. So it's just hands on. It's almost like they don't even know that's what's happening. So there's, and making geometric patterns, looking at in the higher grades, geometry and building things with natural materials using your hands. So
Yeah, again, very important, I think, for ADHD and neurodiversity. My oldest is definitely, she needs the visual of that.
yeah.
When she wants to practice, she wants to pack a gum, not to eat it, just to count it. She really is probably trying to sneak it in her pocket. I know her. But she needs that visual representation. And I was very much like that too. Looking at words on paper, I can't do it. My brain cannot focus. I can get through maybe 2-3 sentences, and then I start just trailing off and then all of a sudden I've read 15 pages, but I've like been in my head, for so long. I'm very much, but I listen to an audiobook, I can spit back every bit of information from it, like
Yep.
that's where I learn from. And very, again, testing, horrible, but project can
Yep.
lead the way, so
Absolutely.
I
And I,
understand that. Oh yes. And for our
I,
listeners, JJ's is sick here, so that's why he's the last couple episodes he's been so quiet. It's not my ramblingness like it usually is.
no, I just wanted to also comment that I love the idea of all these dimensions kind of as a line, you're learning math, but you're also learning about the environment at the same time, which I think in our neurodiverse kids, honestly, is something where it's sometimes hard to apply across different disciplines. So when it's
Right.
actively put into action, I think that these kids can really kind of go with that and continue with not only just a thought, but expand upon that in a major way to see how it all kind of fits together. Because what we do, and I think my kiddo's school is a public charter school. And so it's a little bit different from the typical public education path. So I'm very proud of where we got him in.
Awesome.
Um, but still, there is that, schedule, and you have literacy, and then you have math, and there's not an overlap. It's just, this is what we're doing. We're on math now. We're going to continue this, from where we picked off last class, maybe. Whereas, it sounds like in your method, it's let's combine everything into the greater, the greater picture of things. Sorry, my words are escaping me.
Yeah, no, exactly. You're right. And I want to clarify, I'm not meaning to talk down on all public schools by any means. There are fantastic public schools out there, and there's incredible teachers everywhere. My beef is more with the systemic nature of it from the top down. We actually sell quite a bit of curriculum to charter schools and work with a lot of charter schools. And so, but even just straight up public schools, there's amazing districts like all over the place. So I want to make sure that I'm not
Yeah,
making a
I
blanket
imagine.
statement.
Yeah, I imagine it can be very scary as a teacher to come into a public education system where it's, we start at the top and we work our way down. I must make sure that I meet all this criteria.
Yeah,
My level of emotional commitment to these kids has to be somewhat, put to the side because I have to meet all this criteria.
absolutely.
And that's where my kiddo's school kind of deviates from, is that these teachers are really committed to the individual, which I think
Love
grows those kids greatly.
So important. Absolutely. Yeah.
You would mention mindfulness a few times. What does that look like in this? How do you teach, especially the little ones? I'm curious,
Yeah.
because I've tried to get my youngins on board of like a mindfulness, self-reflection, self-care routine, several failed attempts. So if you've got the juice, I'm ready to squeeze.
Well, I think that there's this misconception that mindfulness means sitting in lotus position and uh, silently meditating with no thoughts for a long time, and that's going to be nearly impossible for most kids. Mindfulness is something that can be woven throughout an entire day. To be mindful, especially at the younger ages, is really just to be conscious and engaged in your senses. And so, it's a moment of meditation when you're washing your hands, which you have to do multiple times a day. Kids got to do wash your hands before you eat, things like that, after you go potty. And if you take a moment to sort of guide a child and say, how does that water feel? Does that water feel like with the temperature? Is it warm? Does the water feel soft? Can you smell the bubbles? And a kid will just zone in. And what are they doing? They're engaging their touch, they're engaging their smell, they're engaging their sight, they're listening to the whoosh, whoosh of the bubbles in their hands. You can do that all day long throughout time. And it's something that I like to do in transition. So, and you can do it as a parent. It's an easy way to do it when you get in the car and you're about to go somewhere. After everybody put your seatbelt on. We're going to listen to the click of the seatbelt, and then we're going to take 10 seconds of silence and take a couple deep breaths all together before we take off. Just okay, let's go. Just one deep breath, a few seconds. You can do these kind of things all the time. And then, of course, as they get older, you can start with like guided meditations. It's really helpful to do that right before nap time. You can put on, there's lots of kids guided meditations. We have guided meditations, lots in our, we have some on Spotify. We also have on our YouTube channel, we have meditations, guided meditations. And it's a great opportunity for kids to just close their eyes and, before they're going to go to bed, things like that. But it's also just, being aware of your body. So in the preschool age group, for example, you're talking about, you have a 3-year-old, a way to teach mindfulness to really young kids. There's some practical ways, and then there's some more kind of, ethereal ways, but it's like talking a child through a tantrum or a big feeling. It's like teaching kids to know what does mad feel like in your body? Where do you feel mad? Do you feel it in your tummy? Do you feel it in your chest? Where does your body feel mad, or where does your body feel sad? Do you feel it in your heart? Do you feel it in your eyes?
Gosh,
And it
most
gets
parents
them
don't do this, in the moment.
yeah, but get them to think and make that mind body connection. getting in touch with your physical body and understanding where emotions come from and how they feel in the body is such an important thing. And breathing, that is like the number one most simple thing to do. And if you have a kid that's really visual, you know what an Obermann sphere is? Those like
Yeah.
plastic things, you can pull them out and they
Expand and
into a big,
yeah.
get one of those and you breathe like.
Oh, that's a great idea. Oh, I'm going to incorporate that. I'm stealing that.
And some kids only have the capacity, they'll do like two breaths with it and they're like dee, 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 they're onto something else. That's good. That's two breaths
Yeah.
is two breaths. It's
Because
twice
I
as
can get
much.
the two younger ones to get behind the breath sometimes, but
Yeah.
our neurodivergent 8-year-old is again she no, that ain't helping me and I ain't trying it,
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think something like that would really stimulate more present focus on the moment rather
Yeah.
than what she's got going on. That would be
Yeah.
something that would get her to join into the rest of the magic breathing.
When you think about autistic kids though, a lot of times they've developed their own mindfulness technique. Stimming is an absolute mindfulness technique. That is that repetitive, they are getting grounded, they are in their body, they are feeling, and it's a self-grounding, and how some kids do really well like with slings and things like that where they can spin around and stuff like that. They are going in during those moments. That's a
Yeah.
self-soothing internal like meditation.
Mine
And
was I would
so
suck on my shirt and I would have
yeah,
this
yeah.
huge wet stain right here
Oh,
from
I have seen that,
sucking on my
oh,
shirt.
so many times. Yes.
And my,
Yep.
my daughter's is bite her nails and chew her skin right off, like that's her
Yep.
stimming thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's in yeah, that's I think really powerful that those options are available, because I think a lot of parents get so overwhelmed in these early stages, right? Because like our young kiddos are so self-absorbed and unfamiliar with the world and confused as to all the stimulus going on, and they want and they don't understand that what waiting is, and that
Yep.
that you have to work for it, or that just because you want it, it doesn't appear. And us as parents, we can really lose that sense of mindfulness,
Yeah.
because you got to get to point A to point B and fold the clothes and pick up the other kids and
Mhm.
go grocery shopping. And there's so many
Yeah.
things to do that sometimes we forget to not, especially when you're dedicating so much of your day to someone else's needs in that way. We've totally lost track of mindfulness and we want to escape feelings.
Yes.
And a lot of people feel negativity or negative emotions and they want to just run the other direction from it. Well,
Yeah.
like, I think if you can find a comfort in that, there's some real like power to understanding the world around us, but we're
Absolutely.
just so uncomfortable with that feeling, So I
Yeah.
think, again, and I think this because we weren't taught this, I
Yep.
didn't, most of us, didn't learn about this until our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s,
Yep.
and going back to what you said earlier, the sooner the better, what
Yeah.
more important thing that we should be teaching kiddos rather than A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, is more of like, who are you? What are these things
Yes.
that are happening to you? Process them now, because otherwise you could spend the next 35 years confused as to everything that's happening at you.
Exactly. Exactly. And having, the public education system also has through that we've lost our connection to nature. We're indoors all day, we're under fluorescent lights, and there's actually, I was just featured, Origins was just featured in a new documentary that's getting ready to come out soon called The Death of Recess. You can check out the trailer on YouTube. But the funding, when the funding gets low, what do they cut? The arts, physical activity,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
two most
Most important.
important the two most important things. And being outside, that's another thing. I mean, you probably know, with most neurodivergent kids, if they're having an outburst or something, a lot of times just going outside can just like calm things down a little bit. I mean, even
Just
with
that
an
change of environment. Yeah.
yeah, even with an infant, if you have an infant that's crying and inconsolable and you just like open the door and walk outside, to just like stop, you know, there's something super powerful. I mean, there's a whole lot of science around, grounding, like having your feet on the actual ground. That is super, super important for neurodivergent kids. Not important for everybody, but particularly children and adults who have self-regulation challenges and things like that. Just putting your bare feet on the ground, touching a tree, touching something alive. It's a grounding that happens. It's like when our nervous system almost gets separated from our bodies, and it's like you're almost existing in two different realms. Your body's here, but your mind is like all over here. And one of the best ways to like merge those back together is to just touch the ground, touch a tree. You know, that lost connection with nature has caused a lot of damage. And so I think kind of through all of these ways, it's kind of trying to heal that again, and bring us back to a state of balance.
You mentioned growing up on the reservation, and I'm curious what's the heritage of your family? What's the tribe of your
I'm I'm
ancestors?
not I'm not an enrolled tribal member.
Uh-huh.
I'm a whole bunch of all kinds of stuff.
Mm,
A very
yeah.
big mix. I have, Portuguese and Spanish and um, South American native, and just a whole bunch of things. The reservation that I grew up on, I'm not an enrolled member there, but I've lived there my whole life, and so that's my default culture, what I
Yeah.
was grown up with, and what I was brought up with. So
That's my aunt. She's married to a Native American man up in Washington and has lived on reservation her whole life. And I spent a lot of time on reservation myself as a kid. And my mom also dated this guy that when he would take us all the time, and whenever we would go with him for the weekends, he'd make me take my shoes off and walk barefoot on the ground.
yep,
And the first week I did it, oh man, it was painful. I got all these blisters,
yeah,
but by the end of the summer, I was running barefoot, like in the
yep,
river. Those things were like calloused,
yes.
lasted longer than any pair of shoes I had, steel toe boots.
Love it.
Well, Genevieve, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. Is there some place that our listeners can reference you, reach out to you, or, if they're involved with homeschooling themselves or in a public school system or charter school system where they want to get, involved and get their kids involved in what you've got going on at Origins? Like,
Yeah,
where can they find you?
absolutely. They can find us on the web at originscurriculum.com. I am personally on LinkedIn as well, so you can look me up there. We have Origins has a really wonderful Instagram account, origins.curriculum on Instagram, and on TikTok, same, origins.curriculum. We have a Facebook page, and we also have a new offering that we're doing that is masterclass for kids, where we're collaborating with experts and people from all over the world in every kind of subject you can imagine, and creating these in-depth courses for kids that are meant to be implemented over the course of 1 or 2 weeks for kids all the way through high school. So if anybody has a passion that they would love to share with kids and want to create a course with us, we would love to collaborate with any, including you two. If there's anything that you think you would like to share with kids, it's a great opportunity. You can go to our website, and I think it's under the contact button. There's a collaborate link. You can click on that and learn a little bit more. And we're also in the final editing stages for our Eco Educator certification course. And this is a course that can be used for parents, for educators of all ages, pre-K through college. It could be used for professional development for companies. And it's a way of kind of learning how to teach, how to see the world, and teach in a fully sustainable way. So it's something that could be really helpful for parents, whether they're homeschooling or not, just as a parent. And that information is on our website as well, underneath curriculum, underneath Eco Educator. So you can sign up to get notified when we release that.
Well, I just already wrote down a list of some suggestions that I'd like to incorporate into the program.
Love it.
I grew up a drama kid, so that was like that was the first place that I felt like, wow, education can be fun. Like, oh my God, this is helping me emotionally and understand myself. It was, in the classroom, I was the troublemaker, the class clown, but on stage, I was entertaining. Everybody laughed and applauded, when they were supposed to, and would watch me cry and cry themselves, and it was such this expression of like myself and all of this kind of tumultuous stuff that was going on in my home life. I was able to really kind of process in a way that my family had not really maybe taught me at the time. So I'm really always interested in, alternative forms of like educational practice, especially when it like combines like emotional understanding and learning and academia in a fun way. So this has been really great, Genevieve. And don't worry, guys. I'm going to have all those links from Genevieve in the show notes and all the stuff that we talked about here today. Thank you for joining us. JJ, go get some sleep. Get some tissues. And we'll see you next time, guys. I'm your host, CJ.
I'm JJ.
And this is Genevieve King. Yeah, see, this is the last two. We're going to do it again because the last guest we had on, I usually do it. Maybe it's my ADD brain. I can't let you. Any little bit of silence feels torturous to me. So instead of like waiting to see if the guest is going to do it, I just bulldoze over. And you and our last guest said it. So you're going to be our second guest to exit out of the show. So let's try it one more time. Thanks for listening to the ADHDads. I'm your host, CJ.
I'm JJ.
And I'm Genevieve.
Until next time. Thanks, guys.